everyone. Welcome to Morning Buzz. My name is Bella Gelman, and I'm the Senior Membership Manager here at the One Club. And welcome to our final Morning Buzz of Creative Week. If you've been here all 5 mornings, I'm very impressed. If you haven't, where have you been? But either way, we're happy to have you. This week, we've heard from agencies, brands, and freelancers making big waves in the advertising and design industries. And before we close out this season, we're so excited to welcome you back to Day 5 of Creative Week. Earlier this week, we celebrated the Young Ones Awards. On Wednesday, we celebrated the best of the design world with the ADC Awards. And of course, tonight, the night of all nights, we have the One Show. Give it up for all of our awards. But let's get into today's show. We have an amazing lineup to close out the week. To kick things off, we're heading to our friends up north to hear from Ryan Crouchman, Executive Creative Director at Canadian agency LG2. Ryan will be exploring the Canadian design landscape and the mid-century discipline currently redefining the country's creative identity. Then, to close the show, we'll be joined by Associate Motion Director Heather Seidel and Executive Design Director Paul Lefleur from the agency Hook. They're going to walk us through how to escape the sea of sameness, discussing why the secret to original work isn't found in an algorithm, but in the physical world. It's going to be a great session. Is everyone ready to get started? All right. First up, as the founder of LG2 Toronto's branding and design department, he has helped grow Canada's largest independent agency into a global powerhouse. His craft-driven work has been recognized by Cannes Lions, DNAD, and The One Show, and he currently serves as the president of the Advertising and Design Club of Canada, creative leader and branding expert. Please welcome Ryan Crouchman.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming out today. Really nice to be here in New York. Great to be part of Creative Week. And when I was first asked if I wanted to, give a talk this morning, I immediately said yes. I love everything going on here, but I thought, what could I talk about that might be inspiring to such a diverse audience, different disciplines from different parts of the world? So I picked a topic that was very inspiring to me, coming from a design point of view. And today we're talking about different forms of inspiration, so I hope you'll find it interesting as well. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about the Canadian design landscape and some of the history that helps shape an aesthetic that is really strong and well-rooted within the design world. And it's kind of looking back to the 1960s and 70s, and this was a time in Canada that was pretty special. It's something that we typically refer to as the golden era of design. We even, caught attention from some really notable American designers, obviously Massimo Vignelli, most known for designing the New York subway system signage and mapping, and also recently some retrospectives in terms of this historical era that more people are kind of paying attention to. So to get into it, we're going to travel back to the 1960s. And when we think about global design hubs, the typical places come to mind. Obviously, we have New York, we have London, we have Paris, and what's really interesting is that Montreal as a city is pulling references from all of these places. We are geographically located in North America, of course, so we have that American spirit. We have colonial French and British roots that were very formative in terms of the culture and city planning and building. So interesting mix of styles and influences, but what's really important to know is that during the 1960s, really to understand Montreal, there was a massive social change happening. Basically, society was rejecting the traditional institutions and influences that were predominantly from the Catholic Church, from English political forces, and because it was more about adopting more of a francophone, independent spirit. And the result of this is basically out with the old and in with something new and very interesting. So, sometimes we see social change that happens around the world, but it's interesting to know that these can result in visual and creative outcomes. So this was just aligning perfectly with the arrival of modernism within North America in a large way. So obviously the European modern movement had been in North America for a little bit in the 1950s, really taking a stronghold, and then even more so in the 1960s. But in Montreal specifically, it was two designers that really kickstarted and kind of like took hold of that scene. Rolf Harder from Germany, an incredible designer who brought a lot of corporate branding, kind of discipline and rigor to the scene, as well as Ernst Rock from Croatia. And these two formed a design studio called Design Collaborative, and they basically brought the idea of cultural branding, corporate branding to a new level. And they designed some incredible work for different arts and cultures festivals. And they even did this Design Canada guidelines, which again, the idea of corporate guidelines was something very new at the time. So it was, again, when we think about what was going on socially, what was going on with new perspectives that were arriving on the scene, it was really the perfect storm. And then in 1962, Montreal was selected for the World's Fair, or as we called it, Expo 67, which was a seminal event for design, because it was really the first time that Canada saw the idea of like placemaking and branding from a cultural, or for a cultural event. And so these are two little islands. This is Montreal on the right. And the idea was they were building a subway. There was going to be lots of rock being dug out of the ground. So let's use that rock and let's build up these two little islands, and that's where we're going to host the World's Fair. Oh, and we have 5 years to do it. So really ambitious vision from the government at the time and the mayor. And these are the two islands, so you can kind of see from start to finish. Really massive, massive project. And what was interesting is, this is obviously pre-internet, and Expo was a chance to bring like international styles, architecture, cuisine, just in general, like international perspectives to a place that, again, was craving new ways of thinking and craving just growth and expansion. So how do you brand such an ambitious project? The mayor, and the city set out a call for entries in terms of what would the actual visual identity be for Expo. These are some of the entries. So some of them are pretty cool, some of them are a little wonky. Really interesting ways of interpreting that idea of an international expo, bringing people together. And the winner is this symbol here. Maybe some of you know it, maybe not, but it's in Canada, it's a really well-known project and brand, and you can find cool stuff in like, thrift stores and stuff. And so they're like collectibles now. So Julien Hébert was the designer of this, this actual mark. And it was inspired by that actually symbol that is one of the oldest icons representing, well, man. This was the 60s, but we can say, like people. And the idea is that, it's people coming together and joining forces around, from around the world. So really beautiful symbolism. The federal government at the time hated it. It was like controversial because they thought it was too modern, too abstract, but the mayor of Montreal ignored them all and forged ahead, which was great because they didn't really understand what was going on there, and they wanted to embrace modernism, and the best way to look international was to look more modern at the time. So this is the full word mark for Expo. Really incredible, imagery and old film from the time. And again, this was basically bringing the world to North America's, footsteps. And the idea that, branding and visual identity could be brought to life across signage, wayfinding, placemaking, even, the collateral that was created to, promote some of the events and pavilions that were there was really fascinating. Like, this is the Pulp and Paper Pavilion for the Canadian Pulp and Paper Association. But like, it's unbelievable. This is basically like graphic design in physical form. And then, so not only do you have these amazing three-dimensional spaces, but then how that's interpreted into some of the print collateral and illustrations to capture the spirit of these creations was really phenomenal. And then you had all of the other pavilions, and they were interpreted in different ways graphically through print and, all through print, basically. And even some of the event signage. So these were all done by different designers, but again, it was one of the first times that an event, a cultural event, was having such a cohesive and consistent brand identity and kind of a visual cohesion. So that was all happening in Montreal, and that's great. And but in Toronto, where I'm from, there was also modernism and this new spirit happening, but it wasn't rooted in so much of a cultural revolution, it was corporate. And this is like very much the American kind of influence as well. We think of designers like Paul Rand from the time and, American birth of corporate identity. But in Canada, we had some incredible, and this is just a really quick snapshot, but some of the notables and my favorites were Alan Fleming, who did the Canadian National Rail identity, which I think is one of the best brands in the world from a visual identity point of view, so simple, so pure. We had Stuart Ashe, who again was an incredible graphic, commercial artist, but who also designed the centennial symbol, which is that very stylized maple leaf, which was the 100th anniversary of Confederation in Canada. And then Burton Kramer, who designed the CBC logo, which again, very famous, very well-known logo, and was just a master of distilling brands down into these iconic marks. So, okay, stuff's moving, stuff's changing, it's fantastic. There's like a lot of excitement and attention being given to design, in Montreal and Toronto and other places as well. But then Montreal kind of comes back again. They strike again with the selection of the Olympics being held in the summer of 1976. So again, what is interesting here is that design was going to play a very large role in helping to make this event not just a success locally, but a really iconic brand internationally. And Georges Huel was the designer of the actual mark for the Olympics. And what I love about this symbol is that it's, pulling inspiration and meaning from different ways. We have the podium, also kind of a stylized M for Montreal. We have the track, and of course, the Olympic rings. And for the Olympics, when we think about what's changed since Expo in '67 and the Olympics in '76, is yes, Expo was bringing a branding, perspective to things, but the Olympics had a larger team of dedicated designers, and they really brought a much more rigorous and consistent approach to establishing a very tight brand guidelines for the actual Olympics brand and how that would be expressed across signage, wayfinding, event collateral, etc. So we saw in that 10-year span a real adoption of discipline and control and really tightening a system, which is pretty fascinating. And then there's all kinds of incredible, again, like poster art and collateral that was created for the games. I have this poster, it's incredible. They're very expensive now, but you can still find them online. Yvon Laroche did these two posters, which again are quite iconic. And we have this one. This is the Olympic Stadium that looks like a kind of extraterrestrial design, but it's really cool. It's in Montreal. If ever you're there, you should check it out. Our office is not too far from here, actually, which is kind of neat. You see it just across the way. And again, so these are just some of my favorites, but I hope that, my point here today is just to show you how like that original social spark can be the catalyst for really embracing new perspectives that can come to life in cultural ways through design. And then I just want to wrap things up here by, trying to look at what inspires me from the past and looking at some current examples. And what makes us kind of special as an agency is we exist in the middle of, Toronto, which is like very corporate, it's the business kind of capital, and then Montreal, which is much more of a cultural playground. It's a really cool city, and we kind of embrace both of those perspectives in the work that we do. And so I just put a few slides of two of our kind of recent projects that I think are influenced by this era in different ways. And the first one is a financial brand. So it's an investment fund for a government organization, essentially. But that didn't mean we wanted to, just do something that felt flat and didn't have an expressive edge to it. So we basically created this symbol here. It's called the CGF, or it's Canada Growth Fund. But again, it's inspired by that idea of embracing that minimalist simplicity, trying to find symbolism in the marks that we make. In this case, it's that the idea of a circular economy of Canadian investments working together to create something profitable and interesting. And of course, the rigor and discipline of a really strong grid and system underneath the entire system, and then trying to find ways so it feels, contemporary and interesting, embracing, 3D animation for showing the minerals and natural resources that this fund is interested in, and then of course, how does it come to life in digital? And so then at the end, it's like, okay, so we created this financial brand. And what I love is when you're able to look at some of the famous financial, visual identities that have been created over the years, and you kind of pop ours in there. It's nice to see that we're able to still distill the work down into that very pure place. And then the final little project is something really fun. I was chatting with some of you earlier about it. We had the opportunity to design a train. So there's like a new train that goes from Toronto all the way up north, which is an essential service. It's a social service, but again, it's like these things happen if you're lucky once in a career to do an airline or a train or something like that. So for us, it was about the idea of connecting the north. So when we were thinking about the branding, it was all about creating an identity that did physically connect the north to the south. And the name of the train is the Northlander. So this is the resulting mark. And then we got to design the train graphics, which is incredible. So like the actual physical vessel, as well as inside, the interior of the train, the signage, the wayfinding. And what I love is like when your work can actually live out in the world in such a way that is not only helpful for people, but kind of is, again, like connecting culture and connecting places in a meaningful way. And so we're kind of like the train's running now, but it's supposed to launch this summer. And we looked at the uniforms and even little things like luggage tags and swag, and our architecture team did all the station branding. So again, this is one of the very famous train brands in Canada called Via, designed in the 70s. same year as the Olympics. And then when we put ours against it, again, it's like, how are we continuing this source of inspiration? And I'm very happy that I feel we've created something that's kind of paying homage to that mentality of the time. So all of that, hopefully, found some of that inspiring, but my question to end on is, we're in an era where influence and inspiration has really been served up on the algorithm. It's heavily curated, it's heavily commoditized and monetized. So we have to ask ourselves, how will your own work, how will your own creative process be meaningful to you? And how will your own histories, we all have different histories, help become the inspiration for other people in the future? So that's what I've got for you today. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
My pleasure.
So we are going to open up the floor and pass the mic around for some Q&A. Does anybody have any questions for Ryan? No? Nope? All good? Oh.
Yeah, so Ryan, we chatted a bit. I've been to Montreal a few times. I've noticed, it almost feels like literally everything is good aesthetic. Oh, sorry. Now I have the mic. Okay, great. Firstly, that was amazing. Thanks so much. And I've always wondered why Montreal has so much amazing design aesthetic. So that was very cool to see. But I almost feel like, I've been there a few times. Everything from interactive websites for small little random restaurants to going out and walking on the street and there's beautiful motion graphics on the, everything from interiors. It almost feels like, is it taboo to just do, is it a immediate must have for every business, corporate entity, everything just feels like it has good design. Is it almost taboo to not have good aesthetic or design in that city?
I mean, it is such a design capital. It's actually a UNESCO design city.
Oh,
so it is kind of has been designated as a cultural hub. But it's because of so many factors. The government really funds heavily culture and arts, more so than other provinces in Canada. So that alone automatically unlocks a lot of budget for branding and design to help keep cultural events really strong. There's incredible design education in Montreal. The design schools are top notch. So the leaders of some of the best studios in town are also teaching at the school. So it's kind of the perfect storm in terms of funding, education, and just also as a French city, it does have its own kind of cultural identity that is, slightly more European influence, but again, with a cool North American edge as well. So yeah, I think it's just evolved since this era, all of these different influences and changes have resulted in that. And yeah, the bar is high there, yeah.
Awesome, that was awesome. Also, do you get a discount for the train or no?
It's a good question.
You have another question over here?
Hello. You mentioned in Quebec, you had the support of the government, and I noticed that a lot of the Canadian work there is either for or seems to be in conjunction with various governments, be it the Quebec, Ontario, Canada. Mm-hmm. What's the lesson to be learned with designing for the powers that be, so to speak? Is there anything that any bits of wisdom that you can share about doing brilliant work, iconic work for the government?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something we can all take to heart. We all have briefs that might be for clients that maybe are more conservative or more traditional, that we might go in thinking, how are we going to do something interesting, for something like that. But I think it's the typical answers. It's having a strong strategic backbone to all of your decision making, bringing the client in early, really showing them your references, educating them sometimes about what's strong design, why do we want to go in a direction like this? Why would that be more effective? So I would say, be optimistic from the start. Bring the clients in, look at your history, look at your influences and your rationale, and people are like very logical. So even if they're not familiar with what you want to do, if you kind of bring them along step by step in the process, you can usually arrive at really incredible work, even if it's for a more traditional client.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And give it up for Ryan.
Thanks, guys.
We'll just pass it along.
All right.
Yeah. And thank you so much to our friends at LG2 for being supporters of the One Club. So now it's time for our next guests. We are thrilled to welcome two creative leaders from the agency Hook. Heather Seidel is an associate motion director specializing in motion digital design and video-driven storytelling with a background that includes NBC News, Paramount, and the Wall Street Journal. She shapes motion systems for some of the world's most recognizable global brands. Joining Heather is Paul Lafleur, Hook's executive design director, with over 15 years of design experience with heavyweights like Droga5 and Google. Paul has led campaigns for the likes of Amazon, Coca-Cola, and Meta. So please welcome Heather and Paul.
Thanks for having us. I am Paul LaFleur, Executive Design Director at Hook. We are a content production creative agency.
I'm Heather Seidel. I'm the Associate Motion Director at Hook.
And today, kind of carrying a little bit off of what Ryan was mentioning, we're going to be looking at where to find inspiration from other places that aren't these same sources that we're always looking at, so that hopefully we're not repeating the same regurgitation that we've seen in all of our design and motion explorations. This mosaic is not something new. This actually came out several years ago. It was to illustrate this, again, sea of sameness that we've seen everywhere. This has only gotten worse since the advent and rise of AI. No shade to the artificial intelligence, but we are pretty much directly sucking on the tailpipe for inspiration these days, getting the same thing from all the same places. So we're going to take a look at one case study for myself, coming from finding inspiration that actually means something to shake up a category of design that desperately needs throttling. And Heather?
I'm going to be speaking. Is this mic still not working? Okay. And today I'm going to be going over two motion-focused case studies and walking over the concept of changing the medium that we make motion in, changing the form, and how that can kind of be a creative superpower to making unique work. Okay.
Okay, I will start off. I apologize for anyone who comes from New York City. You've been bombarded with this for the last year and a half, but it is worth repeating. This is about taking something that is tried and true in design, which is political branding, probably the most uninspiring subcategory of design you can think of. It is jingoistic agro-patriotism to the nth degree. It is red, white, and blue, stars and stripes, flames and flags. It says nothing about anybody, and yet a politician is a human who is, in essence, a brand. So I don't know why we always treat our brands the same for the category where we should be looking for inspiration from within. None of this says anything. Sometimes we get a FedEx logo thrown into political branding, and it means absolutely nothing. So how do we kind of circumvent this great blandening of political branding design? We in New York have, again, been bombarded with political campaigns this last year as we had a mayoral election. This was truly a design case study in finding inspiration that truly stood for something, which was the human behind it. Saying nothing about the politics of the individual, anyone running, but this campaign stood out for all the right reasons. The Type Directors Club actually this week had Anush Bhupathi, who did the design this week, present this and how they came up with the work. It's seen everywhere. This was truly about two different sources of inspiration. One was New York City iconography, and the other was heritage for the politician behind it. As this pull quote says, that while the political campaign branding for this individual did not win them the race, it certainly helped look like nothing else we had seen in politics before this. So why was that? First, New York City. Not surprising, most politicians go to their well of geographic location when they're doing their own branding. But again, it's usually the red, white, and blue, the kind of dulcet tones we see, very muted, nothing too fantastic. This took inspiration primarily from things like the New York City Metro card, rest in peace, and taking those reds and yellows and blues and just dialing them up to be more attention-grabbing than the built from white, kind of boring blue and red that we see on every other campaign flyer. It pulled in inspiration from typography that we see on handmade signs in our bodegas and delis and corner stores everywhere. Also, obviously, on the front of our bodega and signs themselves versus the menu signs. And that yellow is just pervasive everywhere between our school buses and taxi cabs. So this was all things that were familiar to us, but done differently. They were done in a new way, in a new category that felt that it could stand out and be different. But the other important thing was the individual, again, brought some of their own history and heritage to their campaign branding. This was a Ugandan-born Muslim-American Indian descent individual. That is New York through and through, so why are we not bringing that to the forefront as well? So if we look at vintage Bollywood posters, we see exactly those same characteristics in their branding. Saturated stark color blocks, centralized subject matter and figures, those hard drop shadows that give dimension to typography, and then bringing that into their campaign branding with those color palettes, the iconography, it just blends itself seamlessly, but also shows who they are and where they've come from. In essence, this is a campaign that is not cookie cutter. Neither should, nor should branding. Branding should not be a one-size-fits-all. This was a campaign designed for a candidate, not any candidate. So I always look at campaign brands, not just for political campaigns, but the campaigns we do for our clients and ourselves, and kind of ask, why should we be looking at the same category inspiration that produces the same results if every brand should be standing on its own and being something different? And I can tell you that you could not put anyone else's face here and make it work. I can tell you that because this does not work. It doesn't work. I am a miserable human. I wear black 24/7, 365. I do not fit in this world of color and fun and pragmatism. It doesn't happen. So I encourage everyone to make something that is not cookie cutter, one size fits all, and actually is a brand that fits an individual or a campaign, whether it's corporate or human, and go about it in that way.
You look great in that suit, though.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I thought I was smiling in that photo, so you can see how different I am than the individual. My last thing to talk about with finding inspiration references elsewhere is kind of that question is, when do we know we've kind of run out of using that aesthetic as a source of inspiration? When has the well run dry? And I always just go to the example of, with this campaign, is when you become the reference, it's time to move on. When the political campaign's brand becomes used for graphic design to sell $10 chicken over rice with white sauce, we're done. That campaign is over, the branding is done, find inspiration. We've already moved on. Record time in about 18 months.
Awesome. Now for the motion-focused part of our presentation. Do we have any motion designers here? Awesome. Anybody who's ever just opened After Effects before in their lives? All right, I'll take it. So what I would like to cover off on today is this idea that you see big on the screen here. The medium is the motion. Now, this is not an original concept by any means. It's actually a nod to Canadian philosopher Marshall McLuhan, who said the medium is the message. And if you've ever taken a Film 101 class, that might be deep, deep back in the crevice of your brain. That's where I heard it for the first time. But what Marshall McLuhan meant when he said the medium is the message is that the form of something shapes how we perceive and experience it. And I believe that applies also directly to motion designers and the work we do. And that changing the medium can be an untapped superpower in our industry and a way to make truly unique work in what Paul mentioned earlier, this sort of sea of sameness that we are seeing out there in the industry right now. All right, so if you've been on Instagram or Pinterest or even LinkedIn lately, don't sleep on LinkedIn, by the way, there's some really great design and motion references there. But you've probably noticed that some things kind of have started to converge a little bit. You'll see similar designs, similar gradients, transitions, et cetera, in a lot of the work you're seeing. And I don't believe truly that that's due to a lack of talent or originality. I think it's really just because we are motion designers referencing motion work that's referencing motion work to make more motion work, right? And so we sort of naturally start to get stuck in a loop a little bit, which, it's okay to do. It's okay to pull reference from these digital sources, but the danger is that we kind of start to get separated from a really crucial stage of the creative process, in my opinion, which is, to put it frankly, effing around and finding out, like experimenting a little bit, right? And trying some new techniques. So today, I challenge all of us to change how we think about this a little bit. Instead of asking ourselves, what should this look like? I would encourage us all to ask, what happens if I make this a little differently? Because when you change the medium, the tool, the workflow, the process, I think we kind of open ourselves up to discovery. And in a way, things that are a little bit more unplanned. And that's where things get interesting. So today, could you go back one slide? Oh, okay, never mind. Go to that slide. All right, so today I'm gonna actually share 2 examples of motion work that really embody the heart of this philosophy, in my opinion, and are making visually distinct work because of it. The first artist up on screen, his name is Dan Savage, and I've been a big fan of Dan's for about 10 years, and his work has changed a lot over the years as well. I believe he also, I just read this morning, won Best in Show last night at ADC for animation and illustration, so highly recommend checking out his work. I am just going to cover just a little bit about him. But what makes his animation stand out is pretty obvious right away, as you can see. There's texture and variation and rhythm, and his work feels tactile and alive in a way that some digital animation does not. And he's not just throwing a grit or texture pack on top of his work from texture labs like I have a million times. In fact, the texture isn't digital at all. He's actually using a very unconventional tool for his animation, and you can kind of see a little bit of it, right here in this GIF. He's using a pen plotter, which, for reference, is usually used by architects and engineers to create technical drawings and blueprints. But instead, he's using it to physically draw every frame onto paper with real markers and sort of making like a sprite sheet. You can kind of see the drawings right next to each other. So his process is really interesting. He starts with sketches and digital experiments that he converts into vector paths that then feed into the machine, into the pen plotter. And he separates each color onto layers, kind of like a screen print, if any of you are familiar with that process. It's very similar. And then the plotter kind of slowly draws everything frame by frame. And then he scans these drawings back into the computer at a very high resolution. And that's where, in my opinion, a lot of this richness comes in. The bleeding ink, the texture, the inconsistent lines, and all of these sort of tiny imperfections that would normally get cleaned up when you're working in digital animation or might not even get made at all, right? So what's, especially interesting is sort of how the limitations of the plotter actually shape the animation itself. Because the process is sort of slow and physical, the restrictions kind of force some simplicity in the color and the composition of what's being made with it. And it kind of creates this, you can kind of see, especially in the bottom right here, sort of creates this like hypnotic-like rhythm that feels something like between animation and printmaking and Dan's personal sketchbook. So again, I'm just covering this very high level, and I would highly recommend giving Dan Savage a follow on Instagram if you want to see more work like this, because it's very cool and very inspiring. All right, next up is Studio Dunbar, and this is a really interesting project that they did You can probably tell right away, even if you don't know much about animation, that this isn't being animated in After Effects. This is not the After Effects UI. It's not even Cavalry or any of the other new tools. This is like a custom-coded application that they built. And for the identity of the North Sea Jazz Fest in Rotterdam, they created a custom-coded system inspired by the rhythm, energy, and movement of a live performance. And it's hard to see at first, but the system kind of includes like an array of different levers and programmatical like controls. Things like stroke weight, delay, rotation, and more can all sort of be controlled in this UI system. And that the result of that is that every output is sort of custom built and reactive to the actual live music, which I will show an example of in a second. But that, in my opinion, is exactly what makes the animations feel so alive. That no two outputs sort of behave exactly the same way in this motion system. And it just feels like just tangibly different than something you might animate in After Effects. So I'll stop blabbing and I'll just show you exactly what I mean. Nice, right? Yeah. So while there's no like public information exactly on like how this system was built by them, and trust me, I did a lot of research. Interviews strongly suggest that the studio in general uses a lot of code to build the identities that they do. And they use this program called processing in their workflow to kind of develop these custom coded systems for all of their different clients. So a little bit different than After Effects or Cavalry or Blender. They're just custom coding a lot of this stuff, which is super interesting and cool. And honestly, what I love about the Studio Dunbar system is that the whole system feels a lot like listening to jazz, right? It's like expressive and dynamic and slightly different every time you see it, just like jazz. But again, yeah, I'm barely scratching the surface here, and I would highly recommend you sort of check out this case study on their site. So all in all, both of these examples are sort of doing the same thing, right? They're stepping outside of the digital default workflow for animation, and they are instead creating uniqueness in the input and the process and the medium. One uses a physical machine, a pen plotter, which is an unusual tool for animation, and one uses code and input data in order to make something unique. But in both cases, the motion is being shaped by something physical or, slightly untraditional. Could you go back one slide? Okay, thank you. So my argument is this, right? You can arrive at truly unique motion or design by experimenting and trying something new, and yes, making some weird shit. Maybe even making something bad. I think people are so scared these days to like make something bad. But that's like such an important part of the process is messing around, maybe making something bad until you kind of polish it and get it to a place that you feel proud of, right?
Heather makes bad stuff every day.
I think it's an important part of the process. But I think, especially with social media, there is a lot of pressure. You just see kind of the final polished result from these creators, and you don't get to see a lot of the process. So, but yeah, I think, go out there and intentionally try to make something weird or combine techniques is the lesson here. All right, is that all? No, that's not all. At the end of the day, all design in motion is inspired by everyday life in some way, right? So one of the most important things that you can do is move throughout your day with curiosity and start asking yourself what could become reference material. Even if it's not like obviously design or motion related, I think that kind of mindset could change your workflow and what you're doing more than even a specific technique or tool could.
And just giving a last little shout out and some examples here. Zachary Winterton, don't know who he is, never met him, but I follow him on LinkedIn. And he always posts some really interesting inspiration that kind of was the catalyst for this entire idea behind this presentation. he really started to inspire me about posting things of where design trends have come from. Again, these inspiration pieces from elsewhere. I mean, that top right example was, I think, the thing that really started that ball rolling for me. I've never looked at the ass end of a bus and thought, wow, that's beautiful. I want to design something about that. And yet this photo series by Jose was really inspiring. But just some more examples you can see here. Again, taking physical analog inspiration, I think, is what we're trying to get at from our physical world, literally getting out and just looking around, taking bread and making it a physical stamp for the branding of a boulangerie. The bottom right, I think, is a little played out these days, especially in that kind of app tracking fitness space, but it used to be labels on fuses and LED lights or literal window decals on a BMW window sticker that is no bigger than a third of an inch big, became what is known as micrographics. So these things are all around us. We can look at industrial design. You can look through mid-century interior design and look at how compositions are made. Look at brutalist architecture and get inspired by a new piece of typography. There are really a bunch of things out there in the world that if you're just looking for them, they'll inspire you to do something different in our digital space when you're designing or building for motion.
May even use bread for your next print design, like this guy did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much. That was fantastic. And thank you so much to our friends at Hook for their support of the One Club. Now we're going to open the floor to some questions. So we have a few over here. We have a mic going around. Perfect.
From the from Zoran campaign to motion design and the process of finding inspiration, how do you differentiate between something that inspires you, that speaks to you as a designer, and that you're trying to incorporate into a brand that you're working on? And like, how do you bridge that gap? Is it just, I guess, is there a confusion between, oh, I like this because I'm me, but what works for the brand? And like, how do you sort of deal with that, I guess?
I think when you're doing personal and political branding is different, to acknowledge that, than like doing corporate branding. Obviously, you have your corporate overlords and a brief and KPIs to hit and all that fun stuff. Whereas you're doing personal brand as a politician, doing your own campaign branding, I think you obviously have more flexibility. But you shouldn't, whenever we go into any room with our clients and we have an idea that we believe is strong and better than the expected, we're just always, I think, laddering it back to the brief and using the rationale. This will work for these reasons. I think if you go in with logic and sound backing to explain an idea and show that it is fruitful versus just saying, I made this because I like it, which I wish we could all do, I think that's the key, is saying that it's good for these reasons, showing the rationale behind it, and walking through a client that thought process. They're going to look at the end of the day, does this fit the brand for the dollar signs and the KPIs and all that fun stuff? You just need to be able to explain why your design does that for them.
Okay, we have one more question over here.
You work for a number of corporate clients. So for example, Paramount, that's motion pictures. Mm-hmm. What kinds of motion graphics have you done for Paramount? I know it's kind of hard to describe.
Sure, yeah. I freelanced at Paramount actually for about a year, and I had the opportunity to work on the VMAs, which was my first big live event that I did. And I worked on a lot. It was a big mix of things. It was the VMAs. I worked on Jersey Shore ads. Yes, it's still running. And I got to work with just a really talented team of designers and creative directors there. And I'm so grateful for that experience. But yeah, it was a big mix of things. It was live events, some campaigns that were shown in basketball stadiums for Get Out the Vote that Paramount did. And yeah, I don't know, all sorts of things.
So it's basically the individual shows and stuff. It's not like the corporate logos and stuff like that.
I didn't design the logos, no, but I would work closely with the brand team to animate the show campaigns, trailers, things like that. Yeah.
Awesome. We're going to do one last question in the front over here. Thank you.
First of all, thank you. It was really, really insightful. My question is, when you are on a schedule, how you can kind of make this then happen with like this playing around factor, and you want to just try things out and you don't necessarily have a first idea, and how then maybe you just communicate this also, because it's like a creative process that then needs to be like incorporated into a corporate something design. Yeah.
Yeah. You want to start? Okay. I think in terms of like the exploration, obviously clients have timelines and not all of them are the most generous. So in terms of exploration, I think you have to, at least my approach is to carve out intentional time during your week to explore, so it doesn't feel like a rush when a client project comes in. So I actually on, Thursday and Tuesday evenings, towards the end of my workday and like also a little bit past my workday, I carve out like intentional time. And for a while, I was like so overwhelmed by all the things that I wanted to like learn and explore. I put them on this like digital carousel wheel, and I would click it and I'd be like, okay, what am I gonna focus on this evening? Like, am I gonna like look at my design books? Am I gonna like watch a YouTube tutorial on Blender? Like, what are those things? And I would do whatever the wheel told me to do that night, because I felt sometimes overwhelmed by all the things I wanted to learn. So I think carving out that intentional time to explore, so that way when, I don't know, let's say there's a relevant client project that comes up, you kind of already have that idea in the back of your head of like, oh, well, I've explored this thing in the background before. Perhaps, depending on the brand, that could be applicable here, and I could potentially try to like pitch this approach for something, and yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. It was kind of the idea to like the last slide of going out and seeing things first, so you know what's in the back of your mind before you get approached with a brief, so you make that easier connection of, oh, that would line up perfectly with this. Is the perfect time to bring this to the table as a new territory to explore for whether it's graphic or motion design. So I think the more you do that, unfortunately, off the clock, and thinking about design and motion creative 24 hours a day, you'll have that at the ready, so you just pull from your bag of tricks.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Give it up for Heather and Paul. Thank you. All right, guys. Well, that's a wrap on Morning Buzz Season 5. Thank you so much for coming out. These conversations and this community is what makes the One Club so special, so thank you so much. Before you head out, there's a Morning Buzz mirror in the back. Take all the selfies, post us, tag us. If you're new here and you're interested in what we're all about, come chat after the show, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, guys. Bye.